There were about a dozen of them in the room. Hunters, all of them. Each with weapons of their choice, used to hunt the abundance of game in the national park. The cabin was one of the several ranger stations dotted around the landscape. Hours earlier, the warnings of a massive storm had gone around, and all hunters had been advised to go to the nearest cabins for shelter, as these fierce storms were known to pull even the ageless trees out by the roots. Not everyone liked the idea of being cooped up in the cabin overnight, but as the storm raged outside, there was nothing they could do. A few minutes to midnight, the storm finally abated. It went from torrential rains to a slightly windy drizzle. One group of 4 hunters were planning to venture out to one of the fortified vehicles on the property and drive back to civilization. They were discussing the particulars when all the hunters heard the first sounds. It began as a scattering of rapid footsteps, running here and there just outside the cabin. This scampering was so unexpected that one of the hunters asked, "Is there anyone outside?" Everyone looked around and saw that they were all accounted for. After that, footsteps stopped, and then the screaming started. Not scream of pains or anguish, but more communicative in nature, like someone was shouting to get the attention of another. Although the loud vocalization seemed intelligent, when a hunter from inside called out to ask if they needed help, there was never a reply. One of the more restless hunters volunteered to go out and check, but the oldest hunter, who'd been sitting in the corner, spoke for the first time. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," he said to the young man, whose hand was already turning the knob. "Why?" the young man asked, and the old man chuckled darkly. "You won't believe me if I told you." A woman standing to the side with the group that had wanted to leave for the car came forward. "I have to go home. My children are waiting for me. I don't have time to mess around. If you know what's out there, tell us." The weary hunter closed his eyes and sighed deeply before answering. "They're called Sook. I've been out in these woods for a very long time. I've only come across them once. I guess tonight's just one of those nights." "Sook?" the woman asked incredulously. "What the heck are these so-called Sook?" "We don't know. They've been passed down in folklore and local legend for as long as I can remember. All I know is that they're small creatures resembling human beings, and they're cannibalistic, preferring human meat." The room went silent for a dreadful beat before a scoff split the tense air. One of the restless hunters began to laugh. "Are you listening to this bullshit? It's probably just some animals spooked by the wind and rain. Look, if you saps want to spend the night here because of some geezer's old wife tale, be my guest. But I have a warm bed at the hotel and a nice lady waiting for me, so I'll be heading out." Still chuckling, he shook his head and opened the door. A few others followed him, and they closed the door behind him. The old man sighed. The others waited to hear any sounds of distress, but none came, and so they too packed their bags to brave the now lighter weather. "If you're going outside, then you must have a death wish, because there are monsters out there waiting for you," the old man warned again. A few others decided to stay back with him, while 2 more prepared to go outside. Just as the front runner reached for the handle, they heard the first screams. Unlike the earlier ones, these were obviously screams of pain and anguish. Everyone became visibly shaken as they stayed quiet to hear more. The screams persisted, and the last one closest to the cabin had people flinching away and rushing toward the corner where the old man sat. For a split second, nothing happened. There was no sound, even the rain had seemed to cease, and the whole world went silent. Suddenly, someone began to bang on the door, and everyone gasped as the door began to shake and rattle on its hinges. Someone on the other side wanted in. One of the men, who had decided to heed the old man's warning and stay behind, braved going towards the window beside the door to see what was on the other side. It was the woman who wanted to go home to her family. He hurried for the door, quickly unlocked it, and pulled her in while several others hurried to shut and bolt the door again. The woman was bleeding and gasping for air. The pair that had locked the door stood by it to bar it further. The old man shook his head. You do not need to do that. This building is protected against the Sook. You are safe as long as you are in here. The woman passed out as two people worked to staunch the deep cut on her thigh and back. What do we do? They asked the old man. She's going to bleed out before help gets here. There is nothing we can do, the old man said. None of us can go out until the sun rises. Do your best to stop the bleeding, but we must remain in here. To go outside is to forfeit our very life. The two sighed, but did as he instructed. In the early hours of the morning when she awoke, the woman refused to answer any questions regarding what she had seen. She didn't say a word, just shaking and flinching at any sudden sound or movements. The sun broke on the east side of the cabin, sending pale golden light through the window. No one had slept except the old man. Bleary-eyed, they rose and made for the cars, steadfastly ignoring the imprints of tiny feet and blood in the mud. As they drove away, the young man chanced to look back at the cabin and felt ice in his veins as he saw a multitude of tiny eyes watching him from the trees.
Subscribe today or beware.